My name is Emily Carter, and I grew up in a small town in Texas. The kind of place where everyone knows your last name before they know your story. People smiled politely, waved at church on Sundays, and spoke about family values as if they were unbreakable laws. In that town, there was only one acceptable way to love, and everything outside of it was treated like a quiet mistake that should never be named. For most of my life, I learned to hide who I loved as if it were something dangerous, something capable of destroying everything I had if it ever came to light. I didn't learn that fear from strangers. I learned it slowly inside my own home. I learned it at the dinner table in jokes that weren't really jokes, in comments said casually, and forgotten by everyone except me. I learned it when relatives talked about those people with disgust, and then turned to me with a smile and said, "But not you, right?" Every time they said that, something inside me tightened. I nodded, I smiled, and I buried myself. A little deeper dot as a teenager. I didn't have the words to explain what I felt. I only knew that my heart reacted differently. When my friends talked about boys, I laughed at the right moments, copied their excitement, memorized the stories I was supposed to care about. But when a girl laughed too close to me or brushed past me in the school hallway, my body reacted before my mind could stop it. My chest tightened, my breath shortened, and a warmth spread through me that felt terrifying and familiar at the same time. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. And recognizing myself felt like standing in front of a mirror I had been taught to avoid. In my town, being different wasn't something you explored. It was something you corrected. I heard it in sermons at church, in whispered prayers asking God to fix people, and adults warning their children about what was normal and what was not. Love, I learned, was conditional. It came with rules. And I knew instinctively that breaking those rules would cost me everything. I depended on that, so I learned how to perform. Learned how to smile when people asked if I had a boyfriend. I learned how to accept dates I didn't want and pretend to feel butterflies that never came. I learned how to let men touch me while my mind drifted somewhere else entirely. I became very good at pretending. So good that, for a while, even I believed the lie. I told myself that if I tried harder, if I prayed more, if I followed the path laid out for me, whatever was wrong inside me would eventually disappear. DIDN, single quotes T. Instead, it grew quieter and heavier, like something alive that had learned how. To survive in silence. At family gatherings, I played my role perfectly. I helped in the kitchen, laughed at the right jokes, hugged relatives who talked about my future husband as if he already existed. At night, alone in my bedroom, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment where I almost let myself be real and then pulled back at the last second. The fear wasn't just about losing my family. It was about losing my identity, my safety, my place in the world I knew. Everything I had was built on being acceptable. When I left for college, I thought distance would bring freedom. Instead, it brought clarity. I moved to another city, met new people, tasted independence for the first time. And that's where I met Rachel. She was confident in a way I had never allowed myself to be. She spoke openly about who she was, about the women she loved, about the life she wanted without lowering her voice. Being near her felt like breathing after holding my breath for years. And it also felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I told myself I admired her courage. I told myself I just wanted to be like her. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. I loved her. And loving her meant facing everything I had spent my life avoiding. I didn't tell her at first. I watched her from a distance. I listened to her talk about her past relationships. I smiled and nodded while my chest ached with things I refused to name. Every time she touched my arm or looked at me a little too long, I felt exposed, like she could see through every wall I had built. The idea that someone might recognize me before I was ready filled me with panic. So I ran. I started dating a man shortly after. I brought him to family events. I posted pictures online. Everyone was relieved. Compliments followed. Approval came easily when I stayed inside the lines. But at night, lying next to someone who loved a version of me that didn't exist, I felt more alone than I ever had. I learned that loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about being unseen. The hardest part wasn't lying to others. The hardest part was lying to myself. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself sacrifice was part of adulthood. I told myself that some people simply don't get to have everything. But the more I denied myself, the more my body reacted. Panic attacks that came out of nowhere. Sleepless nights where my chest felt too tight to breathe. A constant heaviness that followed me everywhere, even when I was smiling. I was disappearing slowly, quietly, and everyone around me praised me for being stable, normal, and responsible. When I finally admitted the truth to myself, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like grief. Grief for the years I had lost. Grief for the girl I had been before fear taught her to hide. Grief for the life I wanted but didn't know how to claim. Accepting who I was meant, accepting that everything else might change. My family, my friendships, my safety, my future. And that terrified me more than being alone ever had. If you're listening to this and parts of my story sound familiar, I'd really like to know where you're from and whether you've ever had to hide who you are just to be accepted. Reading those stories reminds us that silence isn't as isolating as we think. And if you stay with me a little longer, you'll understand what happened the day I finally stopped pretending, because that moment didn't bring relief or celebration. It brought the kind of pain that forced me to choose between losing myself forever or risking everything I was afraid to lose. For a long time, I believed that choosing myself would mean losing everything else. My family, my sense of belonging, the version of life I'd been taught to protect at all costs. But what no one ever told me was that losing myself was already costing me far more than I realized. The moment I finally told my truth out loud didn't happen in a dramatic setting. There was no perfect speech, no audience, no applause. It happened in a quiet room with my hands shaking and my voice barely steady. I remember saying the words slowly as if they might break if I spoke them too fast. I'm gay. The silence that followed was heavy. My mother didn't scream. My father didn't walk away. They just sat there, staring at me like they were, trying to reconcile the daughter they loved with a truth they didn't understand. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to make them comfortable. I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I let the silence exist. Not everyone stayed. Some people I loved disappeared quietly. Calls were no longer returned. Invitations stopped coming. A few smiles turned cold. And yes, that hurt more than I ever imagined it would. There were nights when I cried so hard I felt like I was grieving a version of my life that would never come back. But something unexpected happened too. I started breathing again. The anxiety that had lived in my chest for years began to loosen its grip. I slept through the night without waking up afraid of myself. I laughed without rehearsing at first. For the first time, my reflection didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like someone I was finally getting to know. And then there was Rachel. When I told her the truth, I expected distance. I expected awkwardness. What I got instead was honesty. She told me she had felt something too, but she had waited because she could see how afraid I was. That conversation didn't turn into a movie kiss or a perfect confession. It turned into something better. Trust. We took things slowly. Pain doesn't disappear overnight, and neither does fear. But love, real love, doesn't demand that you erase yourself. It asks you to arrive as you are. The first time I held her hand in public, my heart raced like I was doing something forbidden. The second time, it felt easier. The third time, it felt normal. And that word normal finally belonged to me. Months later, my family began to change too. Not perfectly, not all at once, but in small, human ways. A question asked instead of avoided. A dinner invitation that included Rachel. A quiet, I'm trying, from my mother that meant more than any speech ever could. I learned something. Important through all of this, acceptance isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it stumbles, and sometimes it arrives later than we wish, but it arrives. Today my life isn't flawless. I still live in a world where love like mine isn't always welcomed. But I no longer carry shame as my shadow. I no longer wake up wondering who I need to be to deserve love. I am loved because I exist. And if you're listening to this and still hiding parts of yourself just to survive, I want you to know something. Your story doesn't end in fear. It doesn't end in silence. One day it opens into something softer, brighter, and truer than anything you've known before. Mine did. And when I look at Rachel now, really look at her, I don't see the risk I was once so afraid of. I see home.